Eastside Legal Access Forum, organized by the Downtown Eastside Literacy Roundtable. My name is Kathleen Leahy. I'm the director here at the UBC Learning Exchange. We're just delighted to see everyone this morning. I want to acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples on whose traditional territories the Learning Exchange sits. And we're very honored this morning to have Roberta Price, who is an elder that we've been working with for the last few years. So we're very honored that she could provide a traditional welcome this morning. We've grown very fond of her, and so I want to share a few words about all the things that she does. She is an incredible and a wonderful person working with everybody in the community, so I think I just want to honor her a little bit by saying a few things about her. Roberta is the proud mother of 4 children and 6 grandchildren, and I just learned this morning that she's going to see one of her grandchildren accept an award for being a very welcoming person in her school in North Delta, so that's very exciting. She's worked for many years as an elder for the Richmond, Delta, and most recently Burnaby school districts, facilitating cultural teaching circles, and has done so for 28 years. You may have heard her recently on CBC talking about this. It was actually an excellent piece that CBC Radio did. She's also involved in the Elder Visiting Program for BC Women's and Children's Hospital and has done work with St. Paul's Hospital. Through her work at the UBC School of Nursing as an advisor, research partner, and elder, also for over 10 years, she has provided Indigenous leadership and support in research projects such as the one she's involved in currently that is looking at women's intimate partner violence and mental health. We're delighted to have her here today to help us open up this forum in a good way. So please join me in a very warm welcome to Roberta.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for your welcome and warm words. And so, good morning, everyone. Very, very important in our culture. The teachings from our elders that you introduce yourself, you say your name, your nation, your family, and if it is not your traditional territory, to ask permission to come onto the territory. So I wish to share with you that my name is Roberta Price, and my heritage is I am Coast Salish. I am Snuneymuxw on my dad's side, and that's where I was born. When they came to our lands, most of the time they couldn't say our names and put their own names over our lands. Sometimes they tried to imitate our names. So perhaps when they couldn't say Snuneymuxw, they called it Nanaimo. So I was born there right on the #1 reserve, right on the waterfront in Nanaimo. And I am Cowichan on my mom's side. And the language of my people is called the Halkamilan language. I knew and understood and spoke my language fluently until I was 6 years old. Beyond 6 years old, I was tortured to have anything to do with my heritage and my culture. I have spent well over 40 years reclaiming back my identity, searching for family members. I searched for my mother all of my life, and I finally found her. I was very, very happy to finally find her when I became a grandmama in 1994. I was able to spend 8 years with my mother before she passed away to find out all about my family, all about our cultural practices, and has brought a great deal of healing for me. And as Kathleen said, I'm a mother of 4 and a grandmother of 6. My youngest granddaughter just turned 6 months last weekend, and her brother will be 21 in August. So although we might not be rich financially as Aboriginal people, I think we're becoming very, very rich and wealthy in this country because we are the highest rising population of young people coming forward. So while we may not be rich, but we're rich in our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And as Coast Salish Elder, I welcome each and every one of you. Honor those First Nations heritage people within the audience, honor you, and welcome each and every one of you to the traditional territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh, in which I have many, many relatives. And in our journey of learning from our elders, I worked a lot with my elders, Elder Vince Stogan from Musqueam, Elder Bob George, and many, many other elders. And I'm never really knowing who my relatives were, and when I met my mom in 1994, I said, "Mom, do you know this elder?" "That's your uncle." "Mom, do you know this elder?" "That's your auntie." Mostly through my Cowichan ancestry, and never realizing that I worked with Elder Vince Stogan, and he was actually my uncle. And his teachings, and I worked with him and Bob George for many, many years. And his teachings were that we would open up our time together, whether it was a meeting, whether it was a conference, whatever it is, we open up our time together in prayer and blessing. So I'm going to bring each one of you out of your comfort zone. I'm going to have you stand up. What I'd like to do is spread out the whole area, so kind of spread out. So we can't make a perfect circle, but we can make somewhat of a...
This is a series of workshops that the Downtown Eastside Literacy Roundtable has been offering this year, and some of you have participated in earlier workshops, so you have some idea of the importance and the productivity that comes out of these discussions. So today, I'd like to acknowledge our partnership with the UBC Learning Exchange. This is a great environment to meet in and to have discussion, and they always serve good coffee and good catering. There's one mistake on the program which I'll bring to your attention. It says at the back we want to acknowledge help catering. It's actually have catering. It's a mistake that we sometimes make, unfortunately. We're having two panels today. These panels represent a cross-section of legal access and legal barriers that people that we work with on the Downtown Eastside, or people who live here on the Downtown Eastside, encounter. We've taken a pretty broad approach to address a number of issues. So the panelists will do their presentation. Each panelist has been instructed to speak for 6 or 7 minutes. We trust that they're going to honor that. We won't have any questions after the individual speakers. We'll have a quick Q&A if there's any clarification you need, and then we'll break into small groups you can see the program here. The first table talk will be 30 minutes, okay? So you can follow on this. This is the program if you didn't get in the front door. So if I could ask the people from the first panel to come to the front table. So Nico Harris, who's just standing up, is from the UBC Law School. Ronnie Greek, who is this gentleman who's approaching, is with Portland Hotel Society and works at Eastside. Terry, I'm missing you. Perry Umiyasu is from the Vancouver Coastal Health. And his colleague, Gail Bell, is a case manager at the Strathcona Mental Health, on the Strathcona Mental Health team. You'll notice that Gail's name was not on the agenda, but this is something that we had agreed to previously, and they will both address these issues. And the fourth person here is Laura Track, who's from the BC Civil Liberties Association. So thank you.
Great, thanks very much, and thanks very much to William and Kathleen for organizing this and inviting the UBC Law School to participate. I just want to say a few opening words about access to justice generally, and then talk a little bit about how the law school gets involved in that. And I know it's no surprise to the people in this room, we have a crisis in access to justice in our society. And everybody knows that, starting with the Chief Justice of Canada, Madam Justice McLaughlin has been very vocal on this issue. Lawyers know it, judges know it, the people know it. And we have a system, we've really created a bit of a crisis that has two parts to it. One, we've created a very complex legal system that you really need a lawyer to guide you through. But on the other hand, nobody can afford the legal services that you need, of that person you need to help guide you through. And I think the biggest indication of that is when I see a lawyer get into a problem, lawyers like everybody else have legal problems, and they ask a friend to help, the first thing they say is, but I can't afford it, can you do it for free? Okay, and if we have lawyers asking other lawyers to do things for free, it really represents how we've created a system where nobody outside of a millionaire, and sometimes you have to be a multi-millionaire or a massive company, can truly afford legal services. And if you just think of the average rates for lawyers, you may have a junior lawyer at $100 an hour or something. Most of the time you're paying between $250 and $500 an hour for a lawyer. And you can see how very quickly you're into the thousands, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, to do a case properly, to do all the things the court says you should do on a trial that may go a couple weeks, you're looking at costs of maybe $200,000 to $300,000. Okay, nobody has those resources, or almost nobody has those resources. And so I think we asked ourselves, well, how did we get into this situation? And I think one idea could be, have we just created an unnecessarily complex legal system that creates this unnecessary need for lawyers? And I don't think that's the case. One thing we see as a student studying law school, we've tried to simplify many of the legal rules. If a legal rule did have a proper purpose, especially if it's a common law things that judge can change, those things have been altered. And when we go through, say in my evidence class, we'll see that most of the rules have a very important reason for being there. And if they've got some unnecessary complexity, that's been gotten rid of. But even when you do that, there are still necessary complexities. Let me just give the example of something like ID evidence. Okay, somebody views somebody and comes to court and says that's the person. And it seems like it's a fairly simple issue, someone identifying somebody, and often the person is credible, they didn't know anybody, they just saw what happened in an alleyway and have identified the person who was, say, the stabber. Okay, that's one of the #1 causes of wrongful conviction. People who think they saw somebody and then they see the person in court and their mind sort of starts fusing those two images together. And they're being completely credible. They're not lying to the court. They really think that's the person. It's the #1 cause of wrongful conviction. And what we've done because of that, we've created some complexities around that issue. How to run photo lineups, how to instruct juries about how ID evidence can often appear to be reliable when it's not. And that's just one example of an issue that looks simple on its face, but lawyers spend a lot of time on issues like that, guiding a judge because it's linked to wrongful conviction. So I think while the legal system has complexities, I think most of the time they're necessary complexities. So I don't think we can't get rid of the access to justice problem that way. On the other hand, is it just lawyers getting rich? Is that the key to the problem? I'm sure there are some lawyers doing really well. I would say on the whole though, if you want to get rich, you don't go into law. Okay? You go into business, you go into some other profession. Lawyers tend to work very long hours, sometimes for decent pay, sometimes not. I think you will find many lawyers are carrying 7 years of debt, often because they've had to do their undergrad and and the 3 years of law school, so they're carrying a lot of debt. They're at law firms that have very high overhead, again because of the complexity of law. You've got legal assistants, you've got a lot of overhead, downtown office space and so on. So lawyers can be doing pretty well, but I don't think that's necessarily the full answer to the access to justice problem. Lawyers are also, I think, spending more time than any other profession on pro bono work. I think if you talk to a lawyer, they will estimate that sometimes at least 20% of their time is doing uncharged work, whether that's community work, whether it's on individual files, whether it's sitting on a board, whether it's, we'll hear later on about LSLAB, overseeing a student clinic and so on. Lawyers give a lot of their time. So how are we going to solve the access to justice problem? And here's one of the great ironies. So people can't afford lawyers, but the legal system is complex. It ends up costing us more in the end. Why? You have judges on complex issues, like a complex family issue of custody of children, and both sides are underrepresented. And you can hear provincial court judges say a trial that should have took 2 days takes 3 months. Why? The people don't have the legal training, they want to bring in broader character issues and so on. The judge is trying to explain these incredibly complex legal rules, the statutes, the regulations, the rules of evidence. And the parties are doing the best they can, but they haven't sat there in 3 years of law school and been articled and so on. And you have a situation where we're actually spending probably a lot more money on a 3-month trial than we would if we had legal representatives representing the people. Okay, and I think one thing we'll see today is it's a complex issue without an easy solution. But I think at UBC, at the Peter A. Allard School of Law, we think we have to be part of the solution. And we do that in a couple of ways. We have a lot of courses that are targeted towards access to justice, but the way we most directly participate in that is through student clinics. Okay, these are opportunities, we call it experiential learning. It's an opportunity for students to actually do legal work within their time at law school. And it really has a couple of advantages. One is obviously access to justice. Okay, the students are getting course credit. Obviously, there's nothing being charged for these legal services. And each year, there are thousands of people being served by UBC students through some various programs I'll go through, who would otherwise not have a lawyer. So we get an access to justice benefit, but it's incredibly important learning for the students. We know more and more, and I know that's one of the themes of the learning exchange is you learn by doing. I can go on and believe me, I can go on 4 or 6 hours in a classroom, blah, 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 and Louis had to sit there and listen to me. But what you would experience by actually working on a file, I think the statistics say you are so much more likely to remember a rule of evidence that you actually had to apply in court, for instance, than just learning in a classroom. So you have the benefit of the student learning very tangible skills. But the third benefit is we've often seen students who get involved in our community clinics and programs, it really opens a world to them. First of all, they appreciate the access to justice issues much more directly than just, again, hearing about the problem. They see it, someone with a serious legal problem who can't afford a lawyer, who needs help. Second of all, it kind of opens up a desire in that person to continue, if not working full-time in that type of access to justice issue, wherever they're working, to continue volunteering. And so I think you often, a student who has a clinical experience, it'll often be the start to a lifelong contribution that they'll make in some way to access to justice. However, we have to do this carefully. I think if you're just going to throw students out there and while they maybe had first year or something, but they're not sure how to properly deal with files, it's going to be lose-lose. The students aren't going to learn any skills because they're doing it without proper supervision. And the clients who are legal issues, it could be a criminal issue, a civil issue, a wills issue, a family issue, it could be a band issue. So that is, and it's a full-time clinic that operates throughout the year, each year dealing with hundreds and thousands of files. We have a criminal clinic, which is focused on criminal trials that are done at 222 Main Street. And it's students, again, under the supervision, and this is all volunteers building on volunteers. The judge who runs it, Judge Galati, is a volunteer. The supervising lawyers are volunteer Crown and defense lawyers, and the students are there providing their time. They do individual criminal files for people that could not afford legal services. We also have something called the Innocence Project. We try and work all parts of the system. Most of our clinics are about representing a person, before a court or tribunal. The Innocence Project is there at the other end of the spectrum. When someone has been convicted and had all their appeals dismissed, it is there to say we're one last group, if you're maintaining your innocence, that will take a last look at your file and see if there's something that can be done to apply to the Minister of Justice to have your case reopened. We know about the history of wrongful convictions in Canada. The problem is identifying. What you end up at the end of a case is hundreds of boxes, and the lawyers did everything they could, and the issues get more narrow as you go up to appeal, and finally the Supreme Court of Canada will dismiss the appeal, and that's the end of it for the regular part of the legal system. What our Innocence Project does, and then we have a couple people who work in the Innocence Project here, they essentially look at the case again. Was something missed? Is there new DNA technology? Is there any new witnesses that can come forward? Is there some parts of the file that were maybe never identified in box number 17 that somehow no one looked at, that maybe there's a key to a new argument? So it's to help people look at trying to reopen the issue, and they're now at the point of actually making applications to the Minister of Justice to have some convictions overturned. So we think we're part of the solution, and we are looking at possibly adding a couple of clinics to, and again, you have to do this carefully, because as I said, there's nothing worse than opening a new clinic that things aren't being done properly. We're looking at the possibility of adding a transaction clinic. It's not just people going to court that can't afford a lawyer, people that need a will, a small business that's barely making it that needs help with doing their taxes. You know, a community group that needs help under the Societies Act. So we're looking to try and open a transaction clinic to address the other great need for legal services, sort of in the solicitors area. And something that Laura has worked for a long time on, we're looking at trying to open a women's clinic that will address a variety of issues, but probably the greatest single crisis we have in access to justice is family law. And the first people you will hear that from are judges, who are, again, a judge has a certain role. A judge is there to be a neutral arbiter. Well, they have one or two unrepresented parties before them on a complex matter. They just brought in a new family legislation, so the lawyers are taking long seminars trying to get up, and they have the benefit of, you know, obviously some of the past law they can apply. The judge is sitting there trying to give legal courses in family law to the two in-person litigants before them. And you know, we know these are only very small solutions, but we think one or two, and I know Pro Bono Students Canada is looking to partner with law students to simply help people do some filing, help people do some paperwork. Because they're going to be on their own, but if a law student can help them with paperwork under supervision, maybe that'll help a little bit. So we know it's only a small part of the solution. I know the Law Society is looking at some other solutions, such as letting non-lawyers, but with legal training, doing some tribunal work and residential tenancy work. Maybe as lawyers, we've priced ourselves out of the market. Okay, maybe we have to lower the fees, or maybe we have to let non-lawyers start doing some of the legal work, because simply that's going to be one way to provide access to justice. But I think UBC has got to be part of the solution in both providing access to justice and instilling in our students the kind of problems we have that will bring it to light and hopefully develop in the student a lifelong interest in trying to provide access to justice.
Thank you, Nikos. Ronnie, please.
I'd like to say the other thing, the other item that I need to frame, which I think is a good starting point for access to justice, is that I work steady nights. So I've done that, my capacity as a night shift coordinator at Eastside, and I've done that on a full-time basis for about 3.5 years. And that is, I would say that that's a starting point to access for justice, because nights are different from days. And the people that I encounter often don't access services at Eastside during the day, and likewise people who are participants during the day, I may not know at all. So the barrier that I encounter as a service provider is that I have, if I'm going to be an advocate for someone who needs help, I have 3 choices. One is to defer it to someone else, like just bump it to, like talk to someone during the day. The other is to actually work with a participant to a certain degree and hand it off. And then the third is to go on my personal time during the day and be a physical support for people. And all of those things are done. Well, we try not to like defer as much, you know, depending on the issue, but those are the models at night that we use, and so that becomes a bit of a barrier for us when we're you know, dealing with personal time and in a very demanding social work environment. The other barrier involved with night shift work is that there are people who people who are that's often where people earn their money, is at night. And so there's people involved in drug trade or survival sex trade work have a very difficult time accessing services that are centered around daytime hours. We experience it ourselves at Eastside. Our detox intake is all done in the morning, and there are significant populations who are discounted from that process just because we're limited to the time we can do intakes. And likewise, access to legal care is very limited in that. So that's just that's something that's often even internally with Insight, it's often overlooked that we have only the moment to deal with advocacy, and we don't have the supports of the social work structure during the day. There are the obvious barriers, like the addict functions in an environment of prohibition. So, I mean, I think I feel the need to acknowledge it, but not at length, just to acknowledge the limitations of having your sense of wellness being removed from you at any moment, either through arrest or confiscation of drugs, and which is a great limitation to people functioning. And we also deal with obviously a lot of street homelessness, and so the complexity of the legal system that was well articulated by Nikos is that much more difficult when you can't like plug in a phone to alert you to appointments, when you don't know where you'll be sleeping on a given night, and those kinds of issues make arrestable offenses just by breaching warrants, for example. And so the cumulative impact of the prohibition environment and the homelessness environment that people are functioning in is a difficult hurdle to tackle. I think I spent some time thinking about this in the positive elements of where I witness positive access to justice, and I think that Insight being a well-accepted service, and in some people like freely use the term an essential service in their lives. I recognize that police and the court system are very willing to recognize it as a life-saving service for people. So, for example, people might be red zoned from certain blocks, but access to Insight is allowable as an exception. Frequently, people who have been using openly on sidewalks and in lanes and whatnot have come to Insight with stories that police have said, use that Insight, or I'll confiscate your drugs. So that level of acceptance is, I think a positive access, like given the culture of prohibition and the inherent difficulties of surviving this environment as an addict. Insight being, being recognized as an essential service for that demographic is very positive.
Liaison worker for mental health services in the Vancouver area, and so by the same one sentence, what my job would be, that would be to bridge the gap between mainstream services and the First Nations community in the Vancouver area. I don't just work in downtown Eastside, but I cover all 6 mental health teams in the area and a few of the hospitals. And there's 4 components to my position. There's education, providing education to forums like this, or in your office, or staff meetings. I'll go in and talk about what my position is, and how First Nations people could access services, and how that's going to look like if they come through services. The other part, like our friend Roberta was talking about, was Native spirituality and how that could help with First Nations clients deal with some of the issues that they deal with, and how that could help you, and to educate you on what First Nations spirituality is, and how it reflects our culture. And, the issue of residential school, we talk about that, and we give you some kind of context of what that would look like for us. The other part is, for the Native community, I would go in and talk about what does it mean to be certified when you get picked up by the police, and do you have any rights after you're certified, and what does that look like, and how would that, how would you get like a second opinion on that, or could you stop something like that, or is it different from being certified on reserve as opposed to being certified in a downtown Eastside or in other parts of Vancouver? Is there different rights and issues like that? So that's education. The second component would be consultation. Literally anybody could phone me. I'm going to leave some cards here today, and literally anybody could call me and ask me questions. And if you got a First Nations client that you think may have a mental illness, and you think you're not sure whether it's drug psychosis or if it's a brain injury or what the fact is, that you can actually call me, and I can help you kind of sort that out. That's any of the case managers or any of the psychiatrists and doctors could actually call me, and we can do a consultation about a client that they're working with. All Native people know how to speak English today, but there's still some cultural barriers. Maybe psychiatrist is not relating to the client, and maybe you just need some guidance around that, or what can you do to help better engage that client with the mental health system. So that's consultation. The third is service brokerage, and that's kind of a fancy word for referrals. I need to know I literally want to know what everybody does. I want to know who those people are. I want to know who the gatekeepers are. I want to, if like a client comes in through your door, I want to know who's the first contact people that they're going to meet, and how is their reception going to be taken. I literally want to know that kind of information. And if you've got a client that needs housing or substance abuse treatment centers, or maybe even just some trauma-based kind of counseling, or kind of legal issues, I can help you guide with that. I can help you, work your way and find the right person that you can talk with that person. The last part is the fourth one is therapy. I've been working with my position for the last 18 years, and I started out as a social worker, ended up being an alcohol and drug counselor, ended up being a youth worker, so I've done a variety of kind of issues in the past 21 years. And so I've been working at this job as a mental health worker for the past 18 years. Am I talking too fast? I usually do this in about an hour and a half workshop, and to fill it in 5 minutes is trying. But I think I'm doing pretty well with this. A couple of things to remember is I'm based out of a place.
I've worked in Ferry for about 10 years, and it's all true. I see a lot of really familiar faces in the crowd here. It's great to see you. I work at Strathcona Mental Health. I'm a case manager. My background is counseling. We have all sorts of case managers there. There's about 25 of us, I believe, working as case managers. We're social workers. I'm a master's level counselor. We have psych nurses and RNs working as case managers too. We also have psychiatrists and GPs working in mental health. We have intake every day on weekdays. You just walk in and say, I'd like to get some help, and we'll sort you. So it's really accessible. We try to be really welcoming to anyone that comes in. I personally see a caseload of about 70 people. Most of them want to see me. There's about 10 people I see involuntarily because the hospitals have sent them to us as involuntary patients on extended leave from hospitals. And the reason that people are seeing me involuntarily is because they're deemed a danger to themselves or others, and they've been certified under the Mental Health Act, which, if you think about it, is quite an incursion into people's liberty. Huge incursion into people's liberty. They're required to take medications that we prescribe. They're required to report to appointments generally. Sometimes they're required to live in particular places. So that's something I'm cognizant always of when I see people in my office. I try to be as respectful as possible. I also try to remind them they have rights, even as involuntary patients. They have a right to a second opinion. They have a right to talk to a lawyer. They have a right to talk to a judge. Probably one of the most important and effective rights they have, though, is to see a mental health review panel and to have their case reconsidered by a mental health review panel. It puts me in an awkward position. I'm an adversary to them in that relationship on that panel. I represent the hospital and the physicians and the mental health team. And I try and make a case for reasons why we keep people on extended leave. That there's, for example, I have to say that there's still, or I have to prove essentially to the panel that there's still a danger to themselves and other people unless they continue with their treatment. So people should have representation when they come to these panels, and probably one of the best places to refer them, if you have people like that in your office, or you find yourself in a situation like that yourself, is to refer them to Community Legal Assistance Society. They provide free legal representation to people going to panels, and they appear on a regular basis in our office and provide us a considerable amount of support to people. That's a really important thing to remember. The people that we see are people with serious and persistent mental illness, usually bipolar disorder that impairs their cognitive function or schizophrenia.
My name is Sarah. I'm a lawyer with the BC Citizens Association. When I was invited to speak about legal access in the downtown Eastside, I sort of grappled with what I would add to the conversation. Great panel here and folks telling us a little bit about some barriers and some of the opportunities that are there. I see Dee Dee from First United, who's providing critical frontline legal advocacy here in the neighborhood. You're going to hear from Lou later with LSLAP. We've heard about the Indigenous Community Legal Clinic. These groups that are really providing direct service and legal support for folks in this neighborhood and throughout our city. BCCLA does not do that. I am a lawyer, but I'm not providing direct representation and legal services. I don't give advice to people. I don't take people to court or assist them to resolve their legal issues. And every day, our office is referring people to people who are coming to us hoping for that kind of support to the community organizations that are represented here today. So I just want to acknowledge my position here is not one of a legal advocate or service provider, but what the BCCLA does do and can do is to try to address some of the recurring and systemic problems that are leading to so many people having to go to court or access legal advice or legal representation. And so we do that in a few different ways. We advocate for law reform, for changes to the law or changes to policy that will hopefully prevent so many people from finding themselves with legal issues that they need assistance and advice for. And what we also do is identify systemic problems in the legal system that need to be challenged in court, but that don't really offer an individual solution. They're not the kinds of issues that one person acting alone can go to court and get assistance for, but they're what we call test cases that require a kind of strategic approach to change a law that isn't working for people. And as far as this access to justice question goes, one of the questions about access to justice is who gets to go and make those kinds of cases? Who gets to go to court and say, this law is harming me and people in my community and needs to change? And there are actual, in addition to the expense, the time, the barriers that Nikos and others have told us about, there's another barrier that exists in actually accessing the courts, which is the law of standing. And I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes telling you about some changes to the law of standing. Who actually has standing or the ability to stand before the courts and challenge laws that aren't working for them? And there's been, driven by a case coming out of this neighborhood involving an organization comprised of sex workers. There's been a huge transformation in this law of standing to make it easier and more likely that unjust laws can be challenged by organizations representing groups of people. So the traditional way that laws get challenged is that an individual, for example, an individual sex worker is charged with communicating for the purposes of prostitution. And she says that is unjust. That violates my rights to life or to security of the person. Criminalizing me for communicating for the purposes of prostitution makes me more at risk in this work. And I'm going to challenge the constitutionality, sorry for the big word, but I'm going to use the charter to challenge the legality of this law at all. And what this group of sex workers did, represented by the wonderful folks at Pivot Legal Society, who I'm sure you all know, what they said was, it is entirely unreasonable to expect an individual sex worker to launch a massive constitutional challenge to the criminal code provisions that criminalize sex work. It is unreasonable for so many reasons that we probably don't need to sort of overview, but you can imagine what it would take for an individual who is marginalized, who may be living in poverty, who is experienced.
Talking about women's issues in particular, as a women's serving organization, that's what we're concerned about. There are many facts around women's inequality. Women just, frankly, have less positions of power in society, less income across the board. Women are disproportionately responsible for childcare, which often leaves women in poverty. This is 2015, and these are issues that we are dealing with in our society to do with women, and particular women as well, who are oppressed even on a greater level due to colonialism, racism, being in sex work, being in poverty. So coming back to this slide and coming back to what I aim to do in my program is utilizing the privilege that I have and the lived experience that I have to work with women navigating, and I think this could also be indicative of the legal system and how women perceive the legal system, and the barriers that they're up against. So it's utilizing that privilege and lived experience to try to lessen those barriers. So some of the things that I do are trying to work to keep women housed. That might be challenging rent increases or challenging eviction notices, helping women get income assistance, disability benefits, assisting and supporting women who are victims of crime or impacted by abuse. Women navigating the family law system, often facing their abuser in that system. So I'm not going to read this entire quote, but this is a quote from a woman who accessed my program, and I just put it up there just to show what the importance of advocacy is. I'm just going to read just an excerpt of it. You do work that makes women like me feel like they are being counted. That is a big thing because it happens so rarely in our lives. What you and Atira have done is provide a safe space and services that rebuild that trust in humanity and shows us that the legal system, in fact, does have a few laws that protect us. Even when I couldn't fill out a welfare application, to be so low and so unable to focus was humiliating. You make a difference and you're a key part of my recovery. That just emphasizes why advocacy and access to justice are really important. I've also learned that women in this community are amazing, resilient, have strength that I don't know I would have to live through the things that they've lived through. Amazingly creative, amazingly funny, and generous. This is a picture that's up in my office. A woman gave it to me. She salvaged this painting from a dumpster. So it's one of the precious items in my office. I'm just going to skip through that. So, knowing that advocacy and access to justice is important, and what women are, the strength and resiliency of the community of women that we work with, those are fantastic things. But unfortunately, what I also see in my work is that I'm not able to meet the huge need, as the panel talked about earlier. We're in an access to justice crisis. And what this picture is showing you is, this is from a recent article that was put out by a lawyer wrote an article about finding out that the government has taken, I think $175 million or $172 million in taxes for legal services, but is actually only putting $75 million of that, the money that they've raised in taxes for legal aid, into the system. So I don't think it's a surprise that we're in a legal aid crisis when that's what's going into the system. And although women are doing amazing with what they have, they shouldn't have to. This is a report card put out by West Coast Leaf, just sort of showing how we're doing on women's equality issues in the province generally. I think it just gives a really good sense. F for access to justice for women. F for social assistance and poverty for women. D's related to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, women in housing, women in prison, and access to childcare. So these are the issues that women in our community, and particularly this community, are facing. I put this slide up to say, you know, we do have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms which is meant to provide equality. It's meant to be the highest law of the land in Canada, and what I think we should aspire to the level of equality that the Charter aspires to. And I think, just thinking back to the picture with my grandfather and the Cree side of my family teaching me that issues of equality and issues where people in need is a community issue. It's not an individual problem. It's something that we all need to be concerned about, and it's all of our responsibility to work on. And there's an actual feasible solution to this problem. This is a report put out by the Canadian Centre of Policy Alternatives and Spark BC. They've done some number crunching. This is not my area of expertise for sure. But what they've found is that it's actually costing us a lot more, and I think this is what we just touched on earlier. It actually costs us more to be in a legal aid crisis and to not provide appropriate health care and not provide all of the basic needs for people than it does to actually do a good job of those things. So just wrapping up, you know, I think what we need to do is work on sort of these things. We obviously see that there's problems, and what we need to do is build up so that everyone has equality. And for women, those things that, you know, in the last 9 years that I've been working at it as an advocate and more recently as a lawyer at Atira, the things that, the common themes of the women that I work with are a lack of childcare, a lack of access to justice, a lack of income, being impacted by violence and abuse. And so the income is there, the possibility is there so that we can raise everyone up. That's it. Hopefully I'm in good time.
Thank you.
Two over. So I'm from the Law Students Legal Advice Program. We are primarily located at UBC, although that's about our only connection with UBC. So we run about 20 legal clinics across the Lower Mainland during the school year at night. So each clinic is open about 2 hours a night every 2 weeks. The boundaries of the people we serve is basically, can a student access it by the public transit system? And so that puts us around, you know, Port Coquitlam is about the limit to where we're going to be able to travel to. That being said, we do assist people with filing, paperwork for a greater area, basically the entire BC. Although obviously the fact that clients have to travel and meet us does tend to limit that mainly to the Lower Mainland. During this summer, we run all day, every day across the Lower Mainland in 10 different clinics, and then we're open during regular business hours usually, although we have a couple of clinics that are open 1 to 9 in the afternoon. And this is primarily decided by these locations who are really kind in providing us with free space. And so whatever they are willing to provide us, we will take. So this program is unique in that it's student-run. And so the executives who run the operations of this program are all UBC students. And for most of the students who volunteer at our program, it's mostly all UBC students, although during the summer we do get a variety of students from across Canada and even some international students who are either have studied somewhere and now wants to practice in BC, or they're going to, for some reason, to the UK for school when really they should be at UBC and doing their schooling here. And they're trying to get some practical experience. And this is something that we think is very valuable for the students. It's not enough just to learn about, undue delay in trials. Some professor can lecture you at that topic for hours on end until they're blue in the face, but you don't get that until you have a case in front of you where there's an 18-month delay in the trial. And so we're the second largest provider of free legal services. We will provide representation for clients across all tribunals, small claims court, and provincial criminal court. About 60% of our cases will run into all up to the end. We also do both criminal and civil. So about 60% of our cases are civil, 40% are criminal. In the civil, we deal with a wide variety of areas. Primarily, though, we've been seeing a lot of people with employment issues. I've just been fired from my job. I've just been hurt at my job. I now need disability EI. How do I get those services? I want severance pay, and we help with that. We also deal with a lot of human rights discrimination, especially in relation to employment, where they say, I recently just had a client who said, you know what, at my workplace, I've just been fired about me being a woman, what do I do? And so we help clients such as those try to get something for the suffering. It's not going to be enough, but it's a little bit. As a frontline resource, what we're seeing really to access to justice is we have kind of reached some limits of our capacity to assist. The number of students we have is about 150. Some will take up to 20 cases at any one time, especially during the school year where they also have to balance school and other volunteering. But now we're getting a lot of clients who we just can't assist because they're above the amount that we think we can, they're making more money than our cutoff rate is, even though that doesn't mean that they're wealthy or that they can afford a lawyer, but we just don't have the capacity anymore. We're also seeing a lot more complex issues come about, which is great for the student. They're getting really interesting cases, but it speaks, I think, something to the system in that they have to come to us. We run on very shoestring budget. We can run a trial for about $300, which in Florida time is about an hour of their time. And this is possible because for students it's completely free. They're not getting credit for it. They're not getting anything other than the skills they learn and knowledge that they're gaining. We have 2 supervising lawyers, but they only provide oversight. And so I also want to just kind of finish with why I enjoy working at the Law Students Legal Advice Program. I started volunteering there the second week of law school, which meant I knew about this much more than the client who was facing me. The reason why I want to volunteer so badly at this program is during my school year between my undergrad and law school, I ran into a residential tenancy issue. I had no idea what to do, but I knew I needed the money back from my landlord. And so I went to LSLAP, and they were able to assist me in all the way to the tribunal stage, reach a result. And so when I came into law school, I was like, I need to give back in some way. And my way was to now volunteer and now work with the LSLAP program. Thank you.
Edelman and Company, but I also work with Legal Services Society in the appeals department. My colleague Maria Sokolova is here as well. She also works with Legal Aid and can answer any questions if you guys have any. I'm really excited to be here, and I think this is a great forum. I often work with many clients in the downtown Eastside, and I feel very isolated when I work with these people, and I bet anybody who works with vulnerable individuals feels the same way. So it's really great to see see how many resources and people are out there working on similar issues and to be able to come together to talk about them. So immigration issues are something that render people who are already vulnerable essentially invisible in some ways. And so a lot of people who are facing immigration issues, they have no idea what to do. And there are services available to them, but there's such a lack of connection for these people to the resources available. A lot of the clients that I deal with face a number of issues. So they have addiction issues, mental health issues. They either don't have status or they're facing the loss of their status. They often have criminal charges or convictions against them, and that's the reason for that. And legal aid does provide assistance to these people in some respects, but in a lot of ways it falls short. And so immigration issues are something that they've been changing a lot under the Harper government, and so already complex legal issues are becoming even more complex. And I struggle to deal with them a lot of times, and so I can't even imagine somebody without a legal background, how they could possibly face these issues alone. So the main types of things that I find people, in particular in the downtown Eastside, face are not having status at all and not knowing what to do about it. So there's people who've been here for 5, 10 years without status, and they just languish because they think that there's nothing that can be done. Maybe they lost their refugee claim or they lost their permanent residence at some point. People can lose their permanent residence, and this is very important that not a lot of people know necessarily, because they may know somebody who's been here 20 years and they think they're actually a citizen, but find out that upon a conviction where they receive a sentence of 6 months or more, or if they're punished of a serious criminal conviction, so that's any sentence that could be 10 years or more, so theft over 5,000, fraud, trafficking, and they've been raising all the penalties lately, so the offenses are more and more these days. But with that type of offense, the person who's been here 15 years, their whole life since they're 1 year old, can lose their status. And so those are a lot of clients that I see whose parents never applied for citizenship for them, who get a trafficking charge and then risk losing their status, even though they have serious mental health issues. They don't know anybody in their home country. They're barely making ends meet here in Canada, and so the prospect of removing them to a country where they know nothing, they don't remember the language, they don't have access to any means to reestablish there is just kind of unfathomable, but we do it. So those people are very vulnerable. And then issues of arrest and detention for small things like jaywalking or failing to pay their SkyTrain ticket. That's how some illegal, or I wouldn't call them illegal, but I'd call them people without status. That's how they come to the attention of CBSA often. And I'll see these people in detention, and if they had come to my office 6 months earlier or a year earlier, there is things that could have been done in their case, but by the time they've been arrested and found by CBSA and they're facing deportation, it's usually too late, because CBSA can get them out there in a matter of days. And then they're deported to a place where they I don't know what happens to them. Just trying to throw some pictures in. So there is options available to these people if you guys are ever working with any people who don't have status and who don't know what to do. There's a thing called the Humanitarian and Compassion Application that Legal Aid does fund lawyers to do. So if they have establishment in Canada, they've been here a long time, they would face hardship upon removal, there is an application they can make. And so you can't fight the removal once they're arrested in detention, because you can't stop removal with this application, but if they come forward to CBSA, there is a chance they could regularize their status and not be deported. They can do a spousal sponsorship if they have a common law partner who's been here for a year. There's appeal rights for the loss of permanent residency. Legal Aid does provide lawyers for that. They could do a citizenship application if they don't have the criminal record yet. Legal Aid does not provide funding for that. There's refugee claims, risk assessments, and some people are just non-removable. So there are a lot of resources out there for these people who don't have status. I find there's a lot more resources available for refugee claimants because I think they are very vulnerable lot of support in the community. I have a lot of people working to help them get access to welfare or housing or employment. But my clients who have lost their status or who don't have status and are not making a refugee claim are very invisible, and it tends to just be me in my office with them trying to figure out what we can do for them to help find some stability for them. I know Access Pro Bono does provide some legal advice. The LSLAP clinic has a specific immigration clinic, which I think is a great resource. I've seen really good work come out of them. And then there's a number of settlement societies that help mainly refugees. So again, there's the support for refugees, but not necessarily for other people. And that's the biggest challenge for me as a lawyer when I am with a client that Legal Aid has funded and I'm able to represent them. For example, if I have a client with addiction issues, I can get them, and we're doing an appeal to try to have them keep their status. I just don't have the support to help them find the stability in their life that the immigration board needs to see to allow them to continue having their status. And then eventually they're going to risk losing it and being deported. Legal Aid does have the funding threshold, and they don't fund a number of types of cases. And so I guess there are a number of problems for people with immigration issues. It tends to be a compounding factor on people who, if you're already vulnerable, already facing mental health issues, when I see people in my office, they just cannot deal with the stress of another issue being their immigration status. And so, well, I think a lot of measures are implemented to try to get these people back on the straight path, or to have an added incentive to fix things in their lives. What the laws completely fail to recognize are that this added stress just breaks some of these people. They've been doing fine for a while, and then once this immigration stress comes, they relapse and they get back into their addiction struggles, and it often causes more harm than good. So I think just pooling the resources and understanding the resources that are available within the community, I feel like I've already learned about some of the resources that are here that I didn't really know about before, is a great first step to trying to come together to help these people access justice. Not just in the legal sense, because sometimes they have legal representation, and that's great, but then they don't have the support in the community that is what they really need in order to have a more stable solution. So that was my presentation.
Thank you very much.
Introduced me by the way my name was originally pronounced, but due to residential schools got anglicized by my father to Laval. I had to write it. And Crete on my father's side, Métis on my mother's side, so from Manitoba. I really want to thank Rebecca for her welcoming remarks and her prayer and her sharing and educating us. Some of us, the ways that we process everything. I wrote speaker notes when I got here. I'm getting very busy, but we all know that access to justice is a huge program, particularly in the Aboriginal community. Some of you are probably aware of statistics that 80% of the Western Canadian province is filled with Aboriginal people, or 4.5% of the population, 1.5 million of us. So it's tragic. I'm more than just a police officer. I'm very involved in the community. I'm the sitting president of the Urban Native Youth Association. I have been for years. Also, we work with the Circle Legal Lodge Society, which is halfway housing for men and women coming out of the federal penitentiary system. I've been the sitting vice president there. And I sit on numerous advisory councils as well. If you have capacity in our community, we do a lot. We're very involved. Some of us don't have capacity because of residential schools. Barriers, poverty. Many of us are poor. Many of us are very young as well. The average age is in the mid-20s now. It's not a good age. Racism, ignorance. I'm just going to share a story that relates to racism that affected me. It was about 3 years ago. I was going through a divorce, and we got this letter from the school saying, oh, we would like to, my ex-wife got a letter from the school saying, we want to enroll your kids in this big buddy program. And I'm not sure if you know, but for Aboriginal children, the school gets $1,000 per student every year. So I've got 2 kids in this Bayview Elementary. So I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool, kind of an after-school thing. And I kind of let it slide until my younger son came to me and said, no, sorry, my older son Gabriel came to me and said, hey, I really want to learn French, but you pulled out the French class for this big buddy program. I'm like, what? And so I looked into it, and what Big Buddy is actually Big Brother. So it's for children that don't have an engaged father, like deadbeat dad kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, holy shit. Here I'm very busy. I actually mentor like a handful of people all the time. So I was really like just taking it back. So I sent an email to the teacher and tried calling, no response. So then I go, screw that. So another letter, I'm awaiting a response, seeing the principal. Again, no response. And so I was like, okay. And so then I went to the head of the school board and the school trustees who I had connections with. And they called me, and like within minutes, the principal was on the phone with me. I actually had, it was about an hour, she just was apologized. But yeah, it was because us, being an Aboriginal man, I was stereotyped as this deadbeat dad. Just no questions asked. I felt really violated and just. And I actually called the superintendent of the schools again and had another conversation with him, and he agreed that it was because I was an Aboriginal man that this had happened, that they just automatically flagged my children as at risk because we're Native. That's just one example. When I'm out with youth, I see youth being looked at as less than other people. They're looked at. I can pass for Spanish, Italian, or whatever, but I'm with my father was full of creed, looked like he walked off the res. I'm just going to share another quick story. My father was an alcoholic and he wasn't in my life very much, but I remember one time he came to the rink and the kids looked at him and said, well, we didn't know you were Indian. And because of all the stereotyping, I felt so much shame that man was my father. I was angry that he was my father. Now I feel angry at society for making me feel that way. A lot of our community, the barrier, too, a lot of it's apathy, but it's also due to residential schools. So we've gotten a shitty hand dealt to us. The police with a strong arm of the government taking our children away. Now there's a lot of underreported crime. And I do a lot of talks with organizations about reporting crime. Why, as a community, we need to report a crime that we deserve the same type of service that they get over in Point Grey, which is, we're getting there. I have to watch. I walk a fine line between being a community advocate and a police officer. I'm very passionate about community issues. Broader society, there's a real lack of resources, even in the police department, like our detectives. Say just our evac unit, for example. Our detectives have hundreds of cases each. And Crown's overworked as well. The majority of the courses cases are shelved because they just don't have the capacity to deal with them. And as such, the perpetrators of violence against their families are feeling the full effect of the law, which is a travesty. We're not protecting some of the most vulnerable people. Here's one that probably ruffle a few feathers, but it's vilification of police as well. Stereotyping. That we're the bad guys. And there are agencies that we do have a strained relationship with, but we need to work through that, really get to know each other, share our knowledge. The VPD is probably on the leading edge of being left-leaning, educating our officers in mental health. I recently trained all our frontline members through May and June in cultural competency training, which, you know, I as an Aboriginal man didn't know what residential school was a dozen years ago. So I don't really blame my co-workers for not knowing what it was. And 90% of them got it. And that's, you know what, it's not just police. If I was talking to a social worker, a garbage man, only 90% of them would get it. It's ingrained, right? That ingrained racism that we've grown up with, or just a lack of wanting to understand. And you know what? We've got the toughest job. Every day we go to work, we're dealing with the worst day of your life. You're not calling us because you're having a great time. And you know what? At the end of my day, I've dealt with a sex assault. I've spent a vast majority of my days. You know I can write off a file in minutes if it's just like, yeah. If it's sex assault, I'll take days if I have to do it right. But just to say I come from a violent sex assault or homicide, and then all of a sudden you're being, it's a minor crime or something, or I'm just helping you out. And maybe I'm not all there. We just get jumped on so quickly, but just think about that the next time if you're having a problem with a police officer who maybe isn't quite being as professional as they should. And I'm not going to cut an excuse for me, because I always carry myself in a professional manner. Just think of that, maybe they just come from a violent sex assault, or maybe child abuse, and they're just not all there. They're still processing. We're human beings. The good, cultural competency training that I just mentioned, that's really was amazing. We had an Aboriginal cadet program, so we're hiring more Aboriginal members through that program, plus just for our recruiting unit. Our community is becoming healthier in Ontario. You know, we see our education rates going up.
I mean, incomprehensible problems from my point of view. And so when you think all the layers that we have to deal with of people who do not have the skills and advantages of education that we have.
We talk about the sex trade workers. You know, there's people selling drugs out there because that's all they know as well. The survival drug trade.
That's right.
Yeah. And these are kids that I've watched grow up that have been in the gangs that have, no matter what I've done with my partners, is they just continue on that course with their FASD, they have undiagnosed mental health issues and addiction. Growing up in the foster care system, which you know needs to be fixed as well.
So thank you all again. An interesting cross-section of perceptions, challenges and problems that each of you face or some of your clients are facing. I'd like to suggest that you can help yourself to a quick break, and when we reconvene, if we could make one group of